Hi, I'm Rowan. For 5 years, I paid every bill. Mortgage insurance, vet emergencies, dental tuition. All of it. Then a fire burned down the house I still had my name on. No one called. Not to ask if I was okay. Not even to say thank you. When I showed up at my mother's door soaked and shaking, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "This isn't a shelter. You're not some stray." That's when I realized I wasn't family. I was funding. So I cut every single payment. And by morning I had 61 missed calls. Not one said, "I'm sorry, just don't cancel the mortgage." Before we dive in, what would you have done in my place? Leave a comment. Because some of us were never invisible, just edited out. The house was unrecognizable. Where once there had been a porch lined with potted geraniums and a front door painted ocean blue, now there were just blackened beams, broken glass, and the acrid smell of soaked ash. I parked across the street because the driveway was still cordoned off with faded yellow tape fluttering in the wind like a warning that had come too late. I sat in the car for a long time staring at what used to be mine. The house I paid for. Maintained. Insured. 5 years of premiums, repairs, pest control, gutter cleaning, winterizing the pipes. Every little thing I did to keep it standing while I lived in a one-bedroom studio downtown just in case my family ever needed space. And now it was gone. Nobody called me. Not when the fire started, not when the firefighters arrived, not when the insurance agent came by. I found out because a friend from the old neighborhood texted me a blurry photo of the ruins asking if everyone was okay. I zoomed in. Saw the familiar outline of our front stoop. And I couldn't move for a solid minute. Now I was here. In the rain. Watching it drip down what was left of the chimney as if the house itself was crying for help no one gave it. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine struggling to come alive. The windshield wipers creaked into motion, pushing aside water that kept coming no matter how fast they worked. I didn't have a plan. My apartment had flooded 2 nights earlier when the sprinkler system from the neighboring unit malfunctioned. The hallway carpets were still soaked, the air dense with mildew and rot. I couldn't go back there, not yet. There was only one other place I could think of. The drive to my mother's house in Saddle Brook took about 20 minutes, though it felt longer in the rain. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. I passed by a gas station, a shuttered diner, and 2 different real estate signs that seemed to mock me. Everything felt too loud. The rain. My thoughts. The silence between them. When I turned into the familiar stone-paved driveway, the porch lights were already on. The curtains glowed golden from inside, shadows moving behind them. I parked off to the side and sat for a few seconds just breathing. My jeans clung to my thighs like a second skin. My boots squelched when I stepped out. I didn't bother grabbing an umbrella. The doorbell was still the same little chime I remembered. I pressed it once. A few seconds later, the door opened halfway. My mother stood in the gap, dressed in a silk robe the color of rust and cream. Her hair was pinned up neatly. She didn't look surprised to see me, just inconvenienced. Rain clung to my eyelashes. I blinked hard. She said nothing. I swallowed. Just a few nights. Until I can figure something out. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "This isn't a shelter, Rowan. You're not some stray." I felt the words hit harder than the cold. "I'm not asking to stay forever, just until I find a dry place." She exhaled slow and sharp. "Ask one of those charities you love donating to. Or one of the cousins whose tuition you paid." She waved vaguely behind her as if gesturing to the ghosts of my generosity. Inside, I could see Camille standing at the kitchen island barefoot in a cashmere-wrapped glass of wine in hand. She made no move toward me. Didn't even say my name. I nodded once barely. "I understand." I turned around and walked back into the rain. The water was colder now, or maybe it just felt that way. My hair stuck to my neck. My fingertips burned from the chill. But I didn't rush. I closed the car door gently. Saturday behind the wheel. My breath fogged the glass. No one followed. No one texted. No one asked where I was going. I had transferred $1,500 to Camille just 2 weeks ago for her dog's emergency vet bill. I had paid for groceries every Thanksgiving. Covered Dad's cholesterol meds for over 2 years without mentioning it. I kept the insurance policy for the house in my name. Not because I lived there, but because they did. None of it mattered. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway slowly, not because I wanted to go, but because I didn't know where else to be. The streetlights blurred through the mist on my windshield. The sky was that strange shade of steel gray that makes it impossible to tell what time it is. The kind of gray that swallows everything. By the time I merged onto Route 208, I wasn't thinking anymore. Not in words. Just fragments. Facts rearranging themselves. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. I kept driving until the lights of the highway blurred into nothing. I passed 3 exits I didn't recognize, turned off at a blinking gas station in Patterson, and found a motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 90s. The sign flickered. The parking lot was mostly empty. I didn't care. Inside the office, the clerk didn't even lift his eyes from the small television in the corner. I gave him my ID and a credit card. He slid a key across the counter without a word. Room 12. Second floor. The carpeted stairwell smelled like mildew and wet cigarettes. The kind of place where no one asks questions and everyone minds their business. I liked that. The room had one working lamp and a bedspread printed with faded pine trees. There was a loud hum from the mini fridge. The air conditioner stuttered every few minutes like it was remembering how to breathe. I didn't take off my shoes. I just sat on the edge of the bed, dripping onto the worn carpet, staring at the closed door. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. The seat of my car still had the imprint of my shoulder blade from curling up across it. I kept the windows cracked open so it wouldn't fog. Woke up twice in the night to the sound of police sirens and once to a man arguing with someone who never answered him. I didn't feel unsafe. I felt unseen, and that felt normal. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. The screen was damp from condensation. I wiped it with my sleeve and opened my banking app. Then I opened the notes file I kept tucked away in a folder labeled Shared Expenses. It was over 3 years long. I scrolled through it slowly past entries marked Dad Meds, Thanksgiving groceries, Camille vet, Camille tuition shortfall, Mom heating bill, house repairs, insurance renewal, and dozens more. The number stared back at me. $450 for Dad's monthly prescriptions. $1,350 for Camille's online courses. $300 monthly to Mom's checking account labeled household. $200 for house utilities I hadn't used in 5 years. None of them had ever been late. I made sure of that. Because I thought being dependable would keep me close. I thought they saw me. I clicked into each auto payment and began to cancel them one by one. The health plan refill Dad had on his CVS account gone. The tuition auto withdrawal to Berkeley online canceled. The house insurance tied to my name with State Mark paused indefinitely. The PayPal monthly recurring transfer to Margot Holt ending in 3,208 deleted. My thumb hesitated only once. On the household line. The money I'd been sending every month like clockwork. I had labeled it out of habit, not logic. Household. As if I was still a part of it. I deleted it. The silence in the room shifted. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt precise. Like a space that belonged to me finally cleared of clutter I never asked for. I leaned back staring at the yellowing ceiling tiles. A slow breath left my lungs. The kind that came from somewhere deeper than exhaustion. My fingers felt numb, but it wasn't from the cold. It was the weight of all I'd been holding finally starting to slide off. I must have dozed off. I woke with my coat still zipped, shoes still on, my phone vibrating violently against the nightstand. I blinked at the screen. 61 missed calls. 22 from Mom. 18 from Camille. 8 from Dad. The rest scattered between Uncle Reese, my cousin Brianna, even 2 from someone listed as Realtor Denise. The last message preview read, "Do not cancel the mortgage transfer." Not, "Are you safe?" Not, "Where are you staying?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just, "Don't stop paying." I sat up slowly, my back stiff from the too soft mattress. I let the phone keep buzzing until it went quiet again. Then I placed it face down on the nightstand. I didn't need to hear their voices. The numbers said enough. The panic had started. Not for me, but for what I gave them. They never saw me. Only the direct deposits. The coverage. The fallback plan. I got up and ran the tap in the bathroom. It sputtered once before turning lukewarm. The bar of soap was the size of a cough drop. The towel smelled like bleach and despair. But I washed my face. I peeled off the damp clothes and changed into the spare set I had in my duffel bag. Black tee. Worn jeans. Socks with a hole at the heel. I stared at myself in the mirror. My hair a mess. My eyes heavy. But they were mine. No mask. No performative smiles. Just a woman in a stranger's room remembering what it meant to belong to herself. Back in bed, the room had gone dim. The buzzing had stopped. I turned off all notifications. No more alerts. No more emails. No more please masked as control. Just silence. It wasn't empty. It was mine. The sheets were stiff against my skin, the kind that feel like they've been washed too many times in water that never quite got hot enough. I lay there listening to the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of footsteps from the room above, and my own heartbeat pressing against my ribs. I didn't fall asleep again. I waited for the morning light to shift through the grimy blinds before I pulled myself up and splashed my face with water cold enough to sting. There was no mirror in the bathroom, just a scratched-up piece of plastic that barely reflected light, let alone a person. Maybe that was fitting. I dressed slowly. Jeans still damp around the cuffs, sweatshirt stiff with yesterday's sweat. I tucked my hair under a knit cap, grabbed my laptop and charger, and headed out. I needed somewhere with warmth, power outlets, and silence. The public library on Elm Street was all three. The walk took about 20 minutes. I passed shuttered storefronts, a half-frozen puddle with oil swirling on the surface, and a school bus hissing to a stop. The air smelled like leftover snow and diesel. I kept my head down. Inside the library, it was warmer than I remembered. The air had that familiar scent of old paper and fabric-covered chairs, a little stale but oddly comforting. I found a spot near the back window, plugged in my laptop and connected to the Wi-Fi. My fingers moved on autopilot. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I was already typing. Saddlebrook Neighborhood Watch. That was the Facebook group my mom and Camille used to post photos of community cleanups and bake sales. I hadn't been part of it in years. Not after the third time Camille tagged me in a fundraiser and got mad when I didn't share it. But it was public now, at least the top posts. And there it was. Pinned to the top. A photo of what used to be our house or mine, depending on who you asked. The caption read, "Tragedy struck our neighbors on Maple Drive. Margot and Camille Holt lost everything in a house fire last week. Please consider donating to help this family rebuild." There was a link to a GoFundMe. Goal $20,000. Donations so far $19,460. My chest went still. I clicked the link. Camille had written a heartfelt story about how she and our mother barely made it out in time, how years of memories were lost in the fire, how they were grateful for the outpouring of community love. There was a slideshow. Childhood photos of Camille. Mom on the porch with her knitting. Family barbecues where I'd done all the grilling, cropped just enough to cut me out. Not one word about me. Not a single mention. No acknowledgement that I had paid every insurance premium for 5 years. That the house had been in my name until I signed it over to Camille for grant purposes. My name had been erased. Again. I scrolled through the comments. "Praying for you and your mom. This is so heartbreaking. Sending love." And then, wait, wasn't the older sister helping financially? Someone told me she pulled the plug right after the fire. Another reply, "Wow. Can't believe people turn on their own family like that. Shameful." I stared at the screen, the words flattening against my chest like a cold hand. My pulse didn't quicken, my hands didn't shake. I just felt tired. But I remembered something. A moment I had forgotten until now. It was 9 months ago. Camille had called me on a Saturday morning, voice bright and urgent. She said she was applying for a community improvement grant, and the application required proof that she was the sole owner of the property. I remember asking, "Are you refinancing?" No, she'd said. "It's just a technicality. I can't get approved unless I show 100% ownership. It's temporary. Purely procedural." I didn't want to complicate things. I was busy. I had a client deadline. I opened the PDF she sent and signed the form electronically. I never read the fine print. She had said it would help. What she meant was it would help her erase me. That single digital signature had removed me from all claims to the property. It had cleared the path for Camille to be listed on the GoFundMe as the homeowner. For Mom to cry in interviews about her brave daughter Camille picking up the pieces. For the community to rally behind their survivors. I wasn't just absent from their story. I had been written out with my own hand. I shut the laptop slowly and sat back in my chair. The overhead light flickered once. A group of kids passed by with a librarian trailing behind them, her voice hushed but firm. Outside the window, a dog walker stopped to untangle two leashes. A UPS truck double-parked. Life went on quiet and indifferent. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't check it. Instead, I pulled out my notebook. The one I used to track payments and receipts. I flipped to the first page. January 2021. HVAC repair. $850. February, new dishwasher. $630. March. Property tax installment. $2,200. I flipped further. October 2022. Camille asked for $1,200 for vet bills. November. $300 for Dad's new prescriptions. $180 for Mom's dental visit. $450 for Camille's rent shortfall. It went on like that. Page after page. I was their safety net, their fallback, their funding model. And the moment I stopped, I became their villain. The librarian came by and gave me a gentle smile. "We're closing early today. Staff meeting." I nodded, packed my things, and walked out into the cold. I didn't cry. Not there, I just kept walking. Letting the truth settle where grief used to live. By the time I got back to the motel, the sun had dipped behind the strip mall across the street, casting long lazy shadows onto the cracked parking lot. The front desk clerk gave me a small nod and pointed to the counter. "This came for you about an hour ago. Courier. No return address." I picked up the envelope. Thick cream-colored paper with my name scribbled across the front in slanted cursive. It looked rushed but deliberate. I turned it over in my hands. The seal was already slit, like someone opened it and thought better of reading what was inside. Back in my room, I set it on the bed and just stared at it for a moment. I don't know why my chest felt tight. Maybe because I already knew whatever was in it wasn't going to be good. I opened it slowly. Inside were 3 folded sheets of paper. Legal copies. One was a scanned version of the homeowner's insurance policy from 4 years ago. My name printed neatly at the top. Rowan Elise Holt. Policyholder. But across it in bold ink was a thick black line striking straight through my name. Below it, in different handwriting, someone had written Camille L. Holt. Next to it in the margin was a date from 7 months ago. And under that a signature. Jared A. Holt. My father. I kept reading. There was an amendment page. A notarized form confirming change of beneficiary and coverage rights. The language was standard bureaucratic cold. I wasn't listed anywhere, not even as a prior owner. I held the paper between my fingers and stared at that signature. I knew that handwriting. I had watched him sign birthday cards with it, parental permission slips, checks for groceries when we still shared a joint account in my 20s. It was him. Not Camille. Not Mom. Him. And I remembered something. 2 years ago, right after that pipe burst in their kitchen, Mom had handed me a red folder. She smiled, that half smile she used when she wanted something, and said, "Just in case anything ever happens, you're the organized one." She had me scan the documents to back them up. I remember asking if she wanted them stored on a flash drive. She said, "No. Just keep them in your cloud or whatever. We trust you." I thought it meant I was being brought in. trusted, included. But looking at this now, I realized I wasn't being included. I was being used. I was the backup plan, the paper trail manager, the free administrator, and somewhere along the way they made other plans. Without me. I set the papers down carefully on the motel bed and sat beside them. The silence in the room grew heavier, like the walls were absorbing what I'd just read. My name erased. Not because of fire, not because of oversight, because someone chose to replace it. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and ran both hands through my hair. My scalp felt tight. My shoulders ached from tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for days. They had done it quietly. No confrontation. No explanation. They didn't need to fight me, they just edited me out. I picked up the envelope again and turned it over, checking for any indication of who sent it. Nothing. No label. No tracking slip. Just my room number written in the same slanted handwriting. Someone wanted me to see this. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was a warning. Or maybe it was a final push to disappear completely. I pulled out my laptop and opened my insurance email archive. I searched for recent correspondence. Nothing under my name, nothing addressed to me in the last 9 months. The most recent email was a renewal confirmation I had paid for 8 months ago. No one had told me they were changing the name, they just let me keep paying. I checked the attached documents. The coverage had been refiled under Camille's name 3 weeks later. It was seamless, legal. And it made me realize something colder than betrayal. They were counting on me not to notice. I shut the laptop slowly. My reflection hovered faintly in the screen, a little older, a little more hollow. Still here. Still breathing. I stood and walked to the tiny window, pulled open the stained curtain and looked out over the parking lot. A car idled 2 spaces over headlights on someone smoking behind the wheel. A couple walked into the motel next door, holding paper bags from a fast food place. Life in its own quiet, mediocre rhythm. Behind me the papers lay on the bed like evidence, except there was no one to show them to. Not yet. I folded them and slid them into my duffel bag beneath the jeans I hadn't unpacked. I zipped it slowly. Tight. Precise. They had made their edits, now it was my turn. The next morning, I drove straight to Ridgeview Credit Union, the one I had used since I was 19, the one my father insisted on because it was locally owned and everyone knew your name. I parked in a visitor space near the front entrance, the same spot I used to pull into when I dropped off deposits for my parents years ago. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above as a teller smiled and pointed me toward the offices in the back. Eric was still there. He had aged a little more gray at the temples, but he still had that calm face that never looked surprised even when dealing with overdraft crises or missing statements. I didn't bother with small talk. Just sat across from him, unzipped my folder, and started laying out documents. I need you to walk me through every transaction linked to these accounts. Especially the joint ones. I think someone's been using my name. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Just turned to his monitor, typed in a few commands, and pulled up the profiles. As he scrolled, I saw it in his face first. The way his eyes narrowed slightly, then flicked toward me with caution. When did you last authorize a wire transfer? He asked. About 8 months ago. And only small ones. Rent support, vet bills. Nothing over 1,000. He nodded and turned the screen toward me. There were 3 transfers in the last 90 days. One for $4,000 to a contractor company in Jersey City. Another for $3,500 to a private tutor for my cousin's kid. The third was a cashier's check sent to my parents' address made out to Margot Holt for emergency home repair. I didn't approve any of these, I said, jaw tight. They were executed under your name, Eric said. But the authorization came through the online portal. IP address is different than yours. We flagged it, but no one responded to the verification prompt. I stared at the numbers. I knew what they meant, but they still didn't feel real. You said different IP, yes. Out of state, actually. Connecticut. Traced to a device used several times before. He paused, then added quietly. It's been used to log into a few of your accounts. Primarily from a device registered to a Camille Holt. My stomach sank, not from shock, from confirmation. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had impersonated me. Quietly. Over time. Eric leaned back. You want me to lock this down, freeze everything? Every joint account, every auto draft, every linked card. I want full control, reset. New credentials. No access from anyone but me. He nodded. I'll issue a freeze order and notify fraud protection. If you want to pursue it legally, we can escalate to our compliance team. Not yet. Just shut it down for now. He moved efficiently, fingers tapping across his keyboard, issuing commands I couldn't see. I sat still, arms crossed, watching the accounts I had built become untangled, closed, reclaimed. 10 minutes later, he printed confirmation forms and handed me a folder. It's done. Any new activity will be blocked. All linked accounts are separated. You're the sole owner now. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. Eric gave me a long look. He didn't ask what happened, he never did, but there was something in his expression. Like, he knew exactly the kind of betrayal that doesn't come with bruises. Back in the car, I stared at the folder in my lap. The engine was off. The silence pressed in thick. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and breathed in deep. Then my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Camille. I let it ring twice, then opened the message preview. You've made everything worse. Mom is panicking. Dad's confused. Why are you doing this? Another ping. We're not the enemy, Rowan. You're tearing the family apart. I closed the notification. They didn't say sorry. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't deny using my accounts. They were only upset that I noticed. I scrolled through my messages, all from the last 2 days. Calls I hadn't returned. Pleas that weren't really pleas, just noise. Guilt dressed up as concern. Another text came in. Family is falling apart because of you. I stared at those words. Read them once. Then twice. Number. The family had been falling apart for years. I was just the one holding the strings. Quietly. Relentlessly. Until my fingers bled. Now I had let go. And they were angry that everything unraveled. I turned off the phone and placed it face down on the passenger seat. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches of the tree by the curb. A man walked past, pushing a stroller, humming under his breath. Life kept moving. But I was done carrying people who pretended I didn't exist until their bills came due. This time I would not pick up the pieces. The sky had shifted into a pale, steady gray by the time I reached the corner cafe on Willow and Park. It was the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso no matter the time of day. The same local spot where I used to cover meals for people behind me in line. Where the baristas didn't wear name tags because the regulars already knew them. I pushed the door open and the familiar chime rang above my head. The warmth hit first, then the quiet hum of conversation and low jazz playing from a speaker near the pastries. A young woman with freckles and auburn hair nodded at me from behind the counter. Hey, welcome in. I gave her a tired smile and slid into the booth near the window, the same one I used to sit in on rainy Sunday mornings when I needed a moment of quiet before starting another week of fixing someone else's life. The laminated menu was tucked behind the napkin holder. I didn't bother to open it. Just coffee, I said when she came over. Sure thing, she said. Black, please. She returned a few minutes later with a steaming mug and a quiet presence that didn't push for more. I wrapped my hands around the ceramic, letting the heat anchor me. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll. I just sat. When she came back again, she set down a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced avocado. I looked up confused. I didn't order this. She smiled gently. You didn't. But someone paid for your breakfast already. Left this too. She placed a folded napkin beside the plate and walked away before I could ask anything else. I unfolded the napkin with fingers I didn't realize were shaking. You were never invisible. That was all it said. 5 words written in small, neat handwriting. The kind of note you write when you know you won't get to explain it in person. I looked around. The booth near the entrance was empty. The line at the counter was short. No familiar faces. Whoever it was had already left. The food sat in front of me untouched. My throat tightened not from hunger but from something deeper. A recognition I hadn't expected to feel in this place. Maybe it was someone I helped, maybe it was no one I knew. But for a moment I felt seen, not needed, not used. Just acknowledged. I ate slowly, letting each bite remind me that this was a new version of my life. One where I wasn't just reacting but choosing. I finished my coffee, left a tip that matched the kindness I'd just received, and stepped back out into the afternoon chill. As I crossed the street toward my car, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Rowan Holt, the voice asked. Yes. This is Matt from Ridgeview Compliance. I just wanted to give you a heads up. We had another attempted transaction this morning involving your closed account ending in 7211. My stomach tightened. What kind of transaction? Someone submitted a physical authorization form requesting a fund release for $8,000. But the signature looked off. We flagged it. Ran it through the verification process. And it matched a scan we had on file from a document you submitted 3 years ago. We think someone copied and pasted your signature onto the form. I closed my eyes. Camille. We traced the submission to an IP address out of West Haven, Connecticut. Same as before, same device ID. Thank you for flagging it, I said. Please send me everything. Already in your inbox. I hung up and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands were steady, but I could feel a slow heat rising in my chest. Not rage. Not even surprise. Just the kind of cold clarity that leaves no room for mercy. I opened my email. The attached file showed a PDF with my name signature and a form requesting a wire transfer to a bank account under Camille's name. Same handwriting as the other ones. But this time they hadn't even tried to ask me. They just took. I forwarded it immediately. To Armand. My attorney. Subject line: escalation. No message body. He'd know what it meant. The reply came back 2 minutes later. Got it. This is more than enough. Let's talk in the morning. I sat there for a moment, still holding the phone, watching the inbox refresh. Outside the window, the wind picked up. Leaves skittered across the pavement. A woman in a green jacket walked past, pushing a stroller. She paused to adjust the blanket wrapped around the baby's legs, then continued on. I leaned back in the seat, letting my head rest against the cold window. The morning had started with coffee and a message of quiet grace. But the day had caught up fast. I wasn't invisible, but they had counted on me staying silent. And they were about to learn what it looked like when I stopped. I drove without music, the kind of quiet that let the engine fill the space between thoughts. The road to Maple Drive hadn't changed. The same cracked pavement. The same leaning mailbox 2 blocks before the turn. But the house wasn't there anymore. What used to be a white 2-story with navy shutters and a porch swing now stood as a blackened shell surrounded by temporary fencing and a no trespassing sign staked into scorched grass. I parked across the street and shut off the engine. For a moment I just sat there, letting the weight of what I was about to do settle in my chest. Then I stepped out. The wind pushed at my coat, carrying the faint scent of ash still lingering after weeks of rain. I crossed the street, boots crunching over gravel, and climbed over the edge of the collapsed curb. No one was around. The lot was silent. Windows from nearby houses were shut, curtains drawn. I stepped over broken boards, careful where I placed my feet. What used to be the front steps had caved in, but the outline of the living room was still visible. The corner where the couch used to be. The area by the fireplace where we hung stockings every December, even after Camille stopped showing up for holidays. The walls were gone, but I could see the shape of it all in memory. Then something caught the light. A frame half buried in soot, bent at the edges, the glass cracked in a spiderweb across the front. I crouched down and lifted it carefully. The photo inside was scorched around the corners, but I recognized it instantly. Me and my mother. I must have been 13. Standing in front of the azaleas in spring. Her hand was on my shoulder. I was holding a watering can, smiling like I still believed that meant something. It used to hang in the living room just above the lamp I bought for her first birthday after Dad moved out. She said it was too modern but kept it anyway. Now the frame was warped and our faces were faded, but the image remained. Her hand, my shoulder. That frozen second where everything had once seemed okay. I held the frame against my chest, the soot rubbing off on my coat, and closed my eyes. Then I stood and walked back to the car. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. At the fire department on Crestview Avenue, the woman at the desk wore a blue vest and reading glasses on a red cord around her neck. I explained what I needed. She narrowed her eyes at me but didn't argue. Just asked for ID and waited while her computer loaded the database. "Give me a few minutes," she said. I sat in a metal chair near the exit and stared at the floor tiles, counting the scuff marks and wondering which ones belonged to me from a lifetime ago when I volunteered at the station in high school. 15 minutes passed before she returned a thin folder in her hand. Residential fire report. Incident occurred at 11:26 p.m. Cause overheating of a portable electric space heater. Room of origin upstairs, bedroom northeast corner. Camille's room. I flipped through the pages. The heater had been plugged into an overloaded power strip. The circuit breaker failed. No sign of tampering, no sign of outside interference. The notes were precise. Accidental fire due to neglect. I read it twice just to be sure. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. 8 months ago, Camille had emailed me. "Hey, sis," she wrote. "The heater in my room is acting weird. Smells like burnt plastic. Mom says we should replace it, but cash is tight. Any chance you can help?" I had replied the same day. Sent her $300 through Zelle. She thanked me once. Never mentioned it again. I checked my banking app. Transaction confirmed. She never bought the replacement. She kept the money. The same heater she claimed was dangerous was the one that started the fire. I stared down at the report again. The fire that erased my name, my history, my role in that house, didn't start from some random fault in the wiring. It started from a problem I had paid to prevent. I closed the folder and returned it to the clerk. She offered to make a copy, but I shook my head. I already had what I needed. Back in the car, I sat still for a long time, letting the timeline click into place. The request, the payment, the silence, the fire, the fundraiser, the signatures, the deletions. It wasn't one moment. It was all of them. Each one planned just enough to look like an accident. Until it wasn't. The air outside had turned colder and the clouds were pulling in low and heavy. But I didn't shiver. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I pulled into the library parking lot just after 9. The sky had that heavy gray look of early winter, thick clouds pressing down like the day couldn't breathe right. I grabbed my bag, stepped out of the car, and zipped my coat all the way up. Inside, the air was still and warm. I nodded at the same librarian from last week who gave me a look like she remembered I wasn't there just for a mystery novel. I settled into the back corner again, same spot near the outlet. The laptop booted up slow like it sensed my tension. I opened my browser and typed in the GoFundMe URL Camille had linked from the neighborhood group. The page was still active. Raised $22,380. I clicked into the donor comment section. Dozens of notes. Thinking of you. So sorry for your loss. Proud of how strong you are, Camille. A few of the names stood out. Mrs. Ellison from our childhood church. Uncle Roy. Even the finance director from Dad's old investment club. I kept scrolling until I found the organizer statement. Camille had written it herself. "I'm the legal homeowner of the Maple Drive property. My mother and I have lost everything in this fire. We are a small, tight family. As the sole provider, I've carried our household alone. This home was my responsibility, and now it's gone. Please help us rebuild." No mention of me. Not my contributions. Not my name on the deed before she asked me to remove it. Not the insurance I kept alive until 2 months before the fire. Just her, a devoted daughter with a grieving mother. I moved to another tab and searched public records. The grant she applied for through the Community Relief Fund. I had to fill out a short request form, but the digital file arrived in my inbox 10 minutes later. It confirmed what I suspected. She had submitted under the status of sole property owner. Caregiver to 2 elderly parents. No co-applicants. No secondary contributors listed. She received $12,500 from that alone. Combined with GoFundMe, that was over $34,000, and not one word of it had passed through me. I clicked over to a different folder on my desktop. Scans of every payment I had made for that house since 2019. HVAC maintenance, plumbing repairs, roof patching, electrical inspections. All in my name. All paid from my accounts. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the transfers. One by one, I matched them to receipts and screenshots. Then I opened a new email. To every cousin who ever asked for a loan. To Mom's pastor at Grace Chapel. To the board of Dad's old investment club. To the contact group labeled Family Admin, a list Camille created back when she wanted me to help coordinate holiday gifts. I wrote in plain language. Hello. There are things you may not know about the house fire on Maple Drive. Things left out of the public story. Then I added the facts. No embellishments, no venom. Camille requested and received emergency donations totaling more than $34,000, presenting herself as sole homeowner and caretaker. That was never true. For 5 years, I paid every bill for that house while living in a studio apartment across town. Mortgage, insurance, utilities. All in my name. Every repair. Every missed rent Camille owed. I paid them. Then came the story of the heater. The emails, the ignored warnings, the photos from the fire inspector. I attached the documents. Screenshots of bank records, insurance notices, the fire department's report. I labeled every file with dates and context. At the end of the email, I wrote one line. You cannot disown someone you never truly welcomed. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. When I finally clicked it, the air felt like it shifted, like the static in my chest had finally moved out. I sat back and closed my eyes. I didn't feel powerful. I felt exact. Outside, the wind pressed harder against the windows. A teenager in a varsity jacket ran across the parking lot with a stack of books under one arm. A mother guided her toddler toward the entrance, one mittened hand dragging behind. I watched for a while, letting the quiet fill in the cracks where anger used to live. Then I packed up my laptop, slid the charger into my bag, and walked out without looking back. I returned to the motel just as the sky darkened into that color between navy and storm. The air was thick, restless, like it knew something was coming. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and dropped my bag onto the bed with a soft thud. The hum of the heater kicked in almost on cue, a low rumble that reminded me how thin the walls were and how temporary everything still felt. I had just slipped off my coat when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps. A pause. Then 2 more. I froze. Not a delivery. Not motel staff. This was different. I moved to the peephole slowly, my breath shallow. It was her, my mother. She stood in the hallway with her coat still buttoned, scarf damp from mist, eyes narrowed like she had rehearsed the confrontation all the way there. She didn't look like a woman in mourning or regret. She looked like a woman who wanted to control the room before she even entered it. I opened the door just wide enough. Hi, I said. We need to talk, she said, brushing past me like it was still her house, still her right. She didn't wait for permission. Didn't ask to come in. Just walked inside and turned to face me with her purse still clutched in one hand like it carried all her defenses. You sent that email, she began, voice tight, barely contained. To everyone. The church, your father's colleagues, the family. Yes. Why? You know why. You humiliated us, Rowan. Your father can't show his face at the club. Camille hasn't left the house in days. I had to cancel our lunch with the D'Angelos because of the whispers. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. So you're not here because of what you did. You're here because people found out. She blinked, then stiffened. Don't twist this. I'm not. I'm clarifying. She stepped forward, each word like a match she meant to strike. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be gossiped about by people you've known for 20 years, to have them look at you like you're some kind of parasite? I tilted my head. I might. Though for me it came with silence. No invitations, no questions. Just being edited out of my own life. You never made it easy, she said. Always so distant. So independent. You didn't want to be part of things. I paid for everything, Mom. That was my way of showing up. That's not what families need. What do they need then? I asked, voice quieter but sharper. Someone who smiles and nods and lets you use their name, their credit, their life so long as they don't make a scene. She hesitated, then deflected. Camille's heartbroken. She said you blocked her. I did. Because of a few mistakes. Because she forged my name. Lied about the fire. Used my history to raise money and never mentioned me once. Not even to ask if I was okay. She turned away, then back again, her hands fluttering once before steadying on her purse strap. You think this is all about money? Isn't it? No, she said, voice lowering like it was supposed to be more intimate. It's about how you made us look. There it was. Not who I was. Not how I was hurt, just the optics. You made us look selfish. You made us look cruel. And you, her voice cracked slightly, you made it public. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting that settle. Then I asked calmly, what was I to you? She frowned, unsure how to answer. What role did I play in this family? What was I to you when I wasn't handing you a check? She opened her mouth, then shut it. Finally, she said. You are the responsible one. The reliable one. That's not love. That's labor. She flinched. I used to think if I gave enough you'd finally see me as a person. Not a problem solver. Not a fallback. Just your daughter. She looked down. You were never not my daughter. Then why was I so disposable? She didn't have an answer. Just silence, stiff and shivering in the air between us. You want me to apologize? She asked eventually. Number? You want us to beg number? Then what do you want? Rowan, I exhaled slowly. I want you to stop pretending that silence wasn't a choice, that forgetting me was accidental. I want you to stop treating me like the storm when I was the roof. Her face twisted, not in pain, but in the frustration of someone who'd lost control of the story. You've changed, she said like it was an accusation. Number, I just stopped apologizing for not being Camille. She turned hand on the doorknob, now her back stiff as iron. You'll regret this, she said without turning around. I didn't move. I already did. For 5 years. She opened the door, stepped out into the mist, and let it shut behind her. I stood there for a long while, letting the stillness return. Letting it wrap around my ribs like something earned. Then I turned off the overhead light and sat down at the desk. I didn't cry. I didn't chase her. And I didn't wait for her to come back. The apartment was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that felt earned, not empty. I had folded the last of my laundry and placed a fresh pot of coffee on the counter. Sunlight streamed through the small kitchen window, catching on the dust motes floating in the air. There was nothing urgent. No alarms, no missed payments, no unanswered demands. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. The rhythm told me who it was before I even checked. I stood still for a beat, then walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Camille. She looked smaller than I remembered. Hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, face, pale lips pressed into a line like she'd rehearsed what she came to say but was already exhausted from the effort. Her hands were clenched at her sides. The sweater she wore hung loose on her frame sleeves, pulled over her knuckles. I opened the door just wide enough. Hey, she said. Hey, can I come in? I didn't answer right away. Then I stepped back. She walked in slowly, like the air inside might reject her. I watched her scan the room, her eyes catching on the couch, the bookshelf, the empty dining table. No family photos. No framed certificates, just a plant on the windowsill and a clean floor. Nice place, she said. Thanks. She didn't sit. Just stood near the chair, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. I didn't know where else to go, she started, then stopped. Her voice already cracking. What do you need, Camille? She looked at me, then really looked. Her eyes were red around the edges, like she hadn't slept in days. It's Mom, she said. She's not doing well. Not since. Everything. Dad's blood pressure's through the roof. The stress is making it worse. They're talking about bringing him to the VA hospital in Trenton. I nodded but didn't speak. She took a breath. I just thought, maybe you could help. Just this once. I raised my eyebrows slightly. Just this once her mouth opened, then closed. It's not like before she tried again. I'm not asking for a blank check. Just a little help to get them through the week. The words sounded familiar. Polished, practiced. Like she had used them before on someone else. Or maybe just said them in the mirror enough times to make them sound reasonable. You always say that, I said quietly. One more time. Just this time. But it's never just once, is it? Her face tightened. It's different now. Is it? She looked down at her shoes. Mom is scared. She says you've turned everyone against us. Dad's embarrassed. They don't know how to face people anymore. And that's my fault I didn't say that. You didn't have to. There was a long pause. I let the silence stretch between us like a wire pulled taut. Do you remember I asked when you told me you needed help getting approved for the townhouse loan? You said it would only be for a year and that you'd handle everything. She didn't respond. Then you stopped making payments. And I had to cover them because the lender called me, not you. That was 3 years ago. I said I was sorry for that. You didn't say it to me, you said it to a voicemail. She looked away. I didn't come here to fight. No, you came here because you thought maybe I still had something left to give. That's not fair. Isn't it? She exhaled, hard, shoulders sagging. So, what you're just done with all of us. Just like that, I stood straighter. You want to know what's unfair? I gave for 5 years. Quietly. Relentlessly. I gave while you pretended I didn't exist. I paid for everything while being left out of birthdays, holidays, even emergency calls. Then when everything burned down, you erased me. I never meant for it to go that far. But it did. She blinked fast. I just thought maybe deep down you'd still care. I do care, that's the problem. I cared enough to break myself trying to hold you all together. But caring doesn't mean I have to bleed every time you want more. She bit her lip, hands tightening again. It's just for this week. For Mom. It's never just for this week. It's never just once. You don't want a bridge, Camille. You want a faucet you can turn on whenever it suits you. Her voice cracked then. You don't know what it's been like. Everyone's judging us. You made it all public. You made it public when you put your GoFundMe in the neighborhood group. You made it public when you used my name and pretended I was gone. All I did was correct the record. She swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. Then say nothing. We stood there in silence, the tension thick and final. She stepped toward the door. So that's it, I nodded. That's it. She opened the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I didn't want to hurt you. You just didn't want to face what it meant when I stopped helping. Her eyes brimmed but didn't spill. She stepped into the hallway without another word. No apology, no goodbye. No deal. I closed the door gently behind her and locked it. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm and stood by the window as the clouds began to break. The first ray of sun slid across the countertop like a quiet answer to a question I didn't need to ask. She came, she asked. And I didn't bend. And that was everything. The voicemail from Armand came just before lunch. I was standing at the sink rinsing a chipped plate when his voice filled the room like a cold front. Rowan, call me when you get this. They filed. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. I dried my hands, picked up the phone, and stepped onto the small balcony. The wind carried the scent of fresh mulch from the landscaping below. Somewhere a dog barked once and fell quiet. When Armand picked up, he didn't waste time. Camille and your mother filed a counterclaim this morning. Emotional distress. Financial abandonment. Claiming you cut them off without notice and left them in a vulnerable position. I said nothing for a moment, letting it settle. Armand continued. But I've already drafted our response. It's clean. Documented. You're in the clear, Rowan. You're sure? He exhaled through the receiver. I'm holding 5 years of financial records, wire transfers, mortgage payments, pharmacy receipts. You funded their lives. With no contracts, no written promises, and no expectations of return. If anything, they're the ones skating close to fraud. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Thanks for moving quickly. He softened slightly. This isn't your fault. And they're not going to win. After we hung up, I opened the drawer beneath my desk and pulled out the folder I had labeled Legacy. Inside were all the old joint account statements, insurance revisions, canceled checks, and screenshots of Zelle receipts. A ledger of generosity mistaken for obligation. I added the new legal reply from Armand to the folder. Then I logged in and closed every remaining account tied to my family. The last one. A checking account I had once opened to deposit money discreetly for Camille took 3 minutes to shut down. When the final confirmation page loaded, a weight I didn't know I was still carrying slid off my ribs like wet fabric. I grabbed my keys and walked to the car without knowing exactly where I was going. I just drove. The streets were dry, the sky flat and pale. I passed the bakery where Dad used to buy apple fritters on Saturdays, the corner gas station where Camille once locked her keys in the car and cried until I drove over with a spare. None of those places needed me anymore. None of them probably remembered. But one place did. The cemetery sat just off Route 47, tucked between a row of pines and a low rusted fence. I parked near the back gate, walked through the crunch of fallen needles, and followed the winding gravel path to the far side. Her stone was still simple. Just her name, Elaine Harper, and 2 dates etched in clean serif font. No quote. No flourish. Just the truth of her presence. She had been my grandmother, but also my lighthouse. The one who taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to speak with my eyes when my mouth wanted to cry, how to say no without folding. When I was 9 and left alone at the school play, she had been the one to show up. Not with flowers or balloons, but with a blanket and thermos of cocoa. She sat through the second half just to make sure I wouldn't walk off stage to an empty room. Now I stood there with my hands tucked into the pockets of my coat, the wind tugging lightly at my sleeves. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. I crouched beside the marker and rested my palm on the cool granite. "I know you'd say to forgive them, to take the high road. But I'm not sure forgiveness is the point anymore. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish them. I just stopped letting them burn my name to stay warm." I let the words settle into the air. They tried to say I abandoned them, that I left them to struggle. But it was never true. I carried them until my back broke. And when I stopped, they didn't reach for understanding. They reached for lawyers. I pulled the folded photo from my coat pocket. It was old me at 12, sitting on her porch with a notebook in my lap and her beside me pointing at the sky, naming constellations like they were cousins we'd forgotten to visit. I had kept the photo taped inside my wallet for years. Today I slipped it into a small plastic sleeve and placed it gently behind her headstone, weighted with a smooth stone I had found at the river. Just in case anyone ever asked who I learned my backbone from. As I stood, a gust of wind blew through the trees, scattering dry leaves across the grass. I tucked my hair behind my ears and whispered one more thing. I didn't fight them, Grandma. But I didn't let them erase me either. On the way back to the car, I didn't feel haunted. I didn't feel hollow. I just felt like I'd honored something that mattered. Something real. Back home, I brewed tea and sat by the window staring at the buildings across the street. They were ordinary brick facades and air conditioners rattling in half-open windows, but they were mine to look at. Mine to return to. The email from Armand came in just after 5. The final confirmation. The court had received our motion. The documentation had been entered into the record. Their claim would be dismissed before it ever saw a courtroom. I didn't cheer. I didn't send it to anyone. I just stared at the sentence, bold and certain motion supported by sufficient documented proof of independent support provided over extended time with no reciprocal agreement. That was all I ever needed anyone to understand. No promises were made. But all of them were kept. By me. Alone. The city sounded different that morning. Less like noise and more like movement. Distant footsteps on sidewalks. The soft clatter of dishes from a diner 3 stories down. Someone's window cracked open, letting out the low hum of jazz bleeding faintly into my apartment. All of it felt gentle somehow, like the world was no longer pushing against me. I poured a fresh cup of tea, the same ceramic mug I'd been using since the motel days. It had a small chip on the rim, just enough to catch light, but not enough to toss it. I liked it for that reason. Imperfect. Still useful. Sunlight streamed through the narrow window above my sink, hitting the top edge of the fridge where a single envelope sat, one I hadn't opened yet. I'd found it yesterday when checking the mail, the logo on the corner, already familiar, Women Rebuilding Initiative. The nonprofit I applied to during the weeks I was still clawing my way out of motel nights and locked bank accounts. I picked it up, held it a second longer than necessary, then cracked the seal. Dear Miss Holt, we are pleased to welcome you as a financial resilience mentor for our upcoming program. Your lived experience, integrity, and insight made your application stand out. We believe your voice will empower others as they rebuild. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter. I didn't jump up or take a photo or send it to anyone. I didn't even smile. But I felt something bloom inside me. Quiet, steady pride. I had nothing to prove now. No one to please. No illusions to maintain. Just a life fully mine, built with clean hands and a spine that no longer bowed under the weight of other people's expectations. I moved to the closet and pulled out a clean blazer, navy blue with soft shoulders. I ran my fingers over the fabric, slowly remembering when I wore it to meetings where my name was never on the presentation, only on the wire transfer that funded it. I smiled slightly and laid it on the chair. It would be useful again. But this time it would represent only me. I tidied the apartment slowly, deliberately. The table was bare except for the letter. The bookshelves held no family photo albums, only paperbacks and a few worn journals. The walls were still plain. No framed degrees. No cheerful reminders of who I had been to anyone else. Just space. Clean and honest. My phone buzzed once across the counter. A notification, no name. No message preview. Just a missed call. I let it fade. I didn't need to look. There was nothing on that screen I hadn't already released. Later I walked to the market on 4th and Jefferson, the one where the owners now recognized me by face, not name. I picked out a loaf of sourdough, a bunch of tulips with closed petals still wrapped in paper, and a small wedge of sharp white cheddar. Nothing extravagant. Nothing for anyone else. Just enough to make the day feel like mine. At the checkout counter, the clerk, a young woman with braids pulled into a high bun, looked at the flowers and said softly, "Someone's having a good morning." I replied, and for once, it wasn't a reflex. It was real. I walked home slowly, letting the sun warm my back. No rushing. No calls to return. No crisis to clean up. Just the sound of my own steps and the soft rustle of the paper bag in my arms. When I got back, I trimmed the tulips and placed them in a thrifted glass vase near the window. Their color reminded me of fresh paint. Not quite pink, not quite coral, something in between, like transition itself. I sat down on the floor, legs crossed, the late afternoon light brushing the tips of my shoes. I opened my laptop and clicked into the folder I had labeled Proof of Love. It held every receipt, every transfer, every note. But I didn't scroll this time. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened a new document. At the top, I typed 3 words: what I kept, and beneath it I wrote the things they hadn't taken. My time, my peace, my clarity, my name. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. It was remembering that I didn't walk away bitter. I walked away because staying meant disappearing. By the time dusk pulled its soft gray shawl over the city, I had brewed another cup of tea and changed into a cotton shirt that still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. I turned on the small lamp by the bed, the one I bought with a coupon and had assembled wrong twice before getting it right. And I sat. No one was coming. No one needed me. And for the first time, that wasn't sad. It was sacred. They would spin their stories. They already had. I knew Camille would find new ways to twist the narrative into something palatable. I knew my mother would focus on optics, not truth. And my father would likely never speak of it at all. But I no longer needed to correct them. Silence for once was on my side. Because I knew what I gave. And I knew what I chose. A life built not from obligation but from boundaries. Not from sacrifice but from strength. Not to prove I was worthy, but because I already was. So now to you, if you're still listening, if this story found you, I want to say this. If you've ever felt forgotten by the people you held up for years, If you've been the strong one, the responsible one, the quiet one who paid for everything in silence. If your name was left out of the story you helped build, then I see you. And I want to hear your story. Share it below, because we are not invisible. And we're not alone.